Hey, Blue Table fans. It's time for another installment of Gatelynomics 101. I did an audio version of this a couple weeks ago, and it wasn't that good. So I'm doing this one. Hopefully there's not too much background noise. So, as you may recall, the first rule of Gatelynomics is you can understand economics. And you must believe this, because if not, well then just give up and let your so-called superiors make all the shots for you. So, and I actually think the field of economics has been purposefully made complicated to kind of scare off the common man. So basically, I'm blazing in, ignorance a firing, and I really don't care, because I'm at least going to give it a shot. So today I'd like to talk about what I call false economies. And this is where you try and achieve one thing, but you actually end up achieving something counterproductive. The author of Dilbert calls this negative work. Around here we call it tanking someone's productivity. So, like, does it take longer to get the crucial bit of information that you need than it does to you know what? I think I just messed that up. Anyway, you get the idea that you can actually... okay, you know what? I'm just plowing through. So one of my favorite books about business is called Freedom Incorporated. Not for everybody. Turns out they stole a lot of my ideas. Really a good book for small to middle-sized businesses, not so much for like individual or just a few people. So anyway, the example they give of a false economy, and what kind of prompted the idea in my mind, is there's this factory where the workers have gloves, and when the gloves wear out, they have to go get new gloves. But because some of the gloves are going missing, they have a thing where you have to go to the shift manager, and then he takes you over to the case, he unlocks the case, then there's a little form the person fills out, they have to check out the gloves, they get their gloves, and then they both go back to the line. Well, excuse me, the guy looking for inefficiencies in this business says, well, how long does it take to round trip for the foreman to do this? And they say, well, it takes 15 minutes approximately. And the guy's like, well, how much does the foreman paid? And it's like $40 an hour. So it takes $10 of labor to round trip get these gloves. And he says, well, how much are the gloves? And they're like 50 cents. So basically, it was a false economy. It was based on the idea that, well, we need to save money by having people not get too many gloves or steal the gloves or whatever it is, when in reality they're just completely tanking out from the labor cost of actually checking out the gloves. So that's a really good example of a false economy. Another one is somebody who will drive 20 miles out of their way to get gas for 3 cents cheaper. And what are other false economies? Maybe you guys can think of some. Another note, when you run a business, you know what, it is so loud in here. All right, there we go. So when you run your own business, you've got to, you know what, it's like my head has got to be like at the very top of this thing. All right, I think that's better. Ah, yeah, that makes me happy inside. All right, so yeah, we're in the conference room. There's no real background noise in here. So when you own a business, you've really got to keep your finger on the pulse. And it is, people don't like it, but you do have to get in and say, where's the money being spent? And when you're talking about labor, you've got to look at, well, what are people doing with their time? And that's why I'm a huge fan of paying by the job, because it makes the person kind of keep track of what their own time is. But that has its hazards too. You have to make sure that somebody, any given worker is doing well enough. So there's still some oversight for efficiency no matter which way you do it. But if you do pay someone by the hour, you've got to know what it is that you're purchasing and keep track of how time is being used. And so let me see if I can think of some other false economies, because I lost my little piece of paper that I wrote down all my notes on. Oh yeah, that's one. Is theft. So you've got to. There's actually an official word for this, which is like basically missing inventory. It's not bleed out. It's something else. But so let's say you put in an $800 security system, but you only had $50 a month worth of stuff shoplifted. So you have to weigh it out, and that would actually be a good investment, because it would mean it would only take 16 months before you broke even on that. So you got to keep track of. Oh, that was the other huge false economy, is the commute. If you have a job, you've got to do the math on your job. So let's say you have a half-hour commute, and then half-hour home. So that's an hour a day, 5 days a week. That ends up being at least 20 hours a month. So let's say it's 20 hours. And so that means it's 240 hours a year. Divided by 40 means you're spending 6 working weeks in your car. And not only that, you're losing the time. You're probably going to have health problems. I had this in California because I had an hour commute both ways. So I spent 12 working weeks a year in my car. And if you do the easy division of a month, that is 3 months, basically, 3 working months. And I was there for 5 years, so I effectively spent a full working year sitting in my car in rush hour traffic. Can you believe that? That just sucked my life away. And so if you have a half-hour commute, then that's what you're looking at annually. Never mind gas, insurance, the chance that you will have an accident, possibly, and be injured somehow. I had back problems because of my commute. So long about my 4th year of teaching in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I had the hour-long commute, I started doing the math, and I was like, oh my gosh, after you take out union dues and all the other subtractions from the paycheck, never mind taxes, I found out that I was only making like $16 an hour. And once you factored in the commute, it was more like 12. And I was like, oh my gosh, I went to college for this? So if you factor in college and all of the fees and whatever it is, if you have deferments that keep piling the interest on, that was the worst possible investment ever. It was insane. It was absolute. I made like $2 an hour for my time down there. Great experience, but money-wise, boy, just you got to do the math on these things. Like if you spend 10 minutes a day, you will on whatever it is. You will spend about a working week doing whatever that is every year. And if you add that up over the course of your lifetime, that's enormous. That is an enormous amount of time spent on whatever that is. Now the opposite can be true too. And we're kind of getting into quantification, which is going to be my 3rd Gatelynomics thing, which is actually doing the math, figuring out, well, what really is going on. And I love quantification. It's fantastic. Like, okay, if you added up all the costs of all the properties in the city where I live, what would the cost be? Like, could you actually buy a whole city? what does it really cost to build a home? And so anyway, I'm getting into quantification with this, but you got to do the math and make sure that that everything adds up. Like right now, I have a 5-minute commute, which is fantastic. And if I could reduce it to 0, I wouldn't. 5 minutes away from home is just about perfect because it gives a little bit of distance, so you can kind of get your head down and get your work done, concentrate. But at the same time, you know, it's not. I only have 2 stop signs on my way to my house. So in a way, getting a job closer to you is like getting a raise. And I've often wondered, what if you did it so that so you didn't even need a car? You know, cars didn't always exist, and people did live. So what if you just didn't have a car and you just lived in a place where everything was close enough to, you know, just be in walking distance? And you might say, well, but, you know, what if you need to go on a trip or whatever? Well, rent a car. Spend $100, $150, whatever, and rent a car for a few days. See? You got to think outside the box. And that's what I'm trying to do these days, is think of different ways of doing things. For example, I had like 12 workers, I guess, and I had a health insurance guy come in. This is when the whole Obamacare thing was kind of being bandied about. And so I was like, well, I wonder how much health care even costs. Maybe, you know, I should look into that. Oh, and by the way, there's such a thing as just buying the service that you need. You go. I've been 7 years with only catastrophic, meaning I've paid, the insurance is paid for hardly anything. We just go in, we pay cash. My younger son swallowed a penny, and he was in quite a bit of discomfort as that thing went down. And so he swallowed a penny, and we just went down. We paid cash. People give you discounts for cash all the time. Love me some cash. So I thought, well, and they said, well, for 12 people, it's $3,000 a month or something. It was even more than that, I'm pretty sure. And I was like, wow, that is pretty brutal. I mean, but I thought, well, what about this? What if I had 100 employees, right? And every year I accounted in my accounting, not deducting from their paychecks or anything. I just accounted for $1,000 per employee. And then I took that $100,000 and I went out and said, you there, doctor, I want you to come and work for me part or full time and only take care of my people and their families. Deliver the babies, set the broken bones, diagnose problems that happen, whatever it is, write prescriptions. Maybe I'll even have a kitty where people can just come to me and say, you know, or I'll have like a purser or what's that called? Like a disbursement office that'll just say, oh, okay, you need this prescription. Just make sure everyone's taken care of. Ta-da! Isn't that a neat idea? Have someone, like a company big enough where one of the people on the payroll is a doctor. And you could certainly do that with 300. You could find someone out of medical school. Aha! And there's even more. What if you found someone on staff and said, tell you what, you're going to work here for 8 years, but I'm going to put you through medical school. Or whatever it is. And maybe that won't work. Maybe it's a dumb idea. Maybe there's, you know, gilded barriers to entry into that market that make it so I won't be able to do that. But you get the idea, right? For example, like I said, I was a teacher in California. So I was technically a public employee in California. And I'm glad I got out of there when I did, because I don't think it went so well in the end. So anyway, our health insurance, when you looked on my paycheck, if I remember it right, it was about $850. In fact, they called the teachers down. They say, well, which kind of plan do you want? This is how much it is. And so I'm just pulling some rough numbers. So it's like $850, and the school district covered for half of that. And I was like, Okay, you know what? I'm going to put this under a new heading. So we talked about false economies. Now we're talking about do the math. And so it's $850. The school district paid half, and I was like, well, thank goodness the school district was paying this, because there's no way we could afford, you know, $850. It was my wife and 2 kids. But when I started painting miniatures, and we just went to go buy our insurance, we bought effectively the same plan for $405 a month. In other words, it was somewhere around $20 to $40 a month less than the half that we were paying. Like, I would have been better to simply have foregone the school thing entirely and said, you know what, why don't you just pay me the entire amount? And I would have been ahead $30 a month times 12 months a year. Would have been probably over $1,000 for the time that I was there. So things add up. The little things just drip, drip, drip. They add up. Same thing here. If look at one of the artist desks out here. It's 2 feet by 4 feet typically. Sometimes more. Sometimes they have 2. And then they have their paints and stuff. That's all provided by the studio. But they have their paints and their brushes, and that's all I started out with. I started out with about $200 worth of paints and brushes and equipment. And that's it, a Dremel. $200. And by working, and that's where it adds up, by working a little bit extra, a little bit extra, a little bit extra, skipping vacations, working on holidays, that has parlayed into what you see before you. Like the material improvements on this studio were paid for the most part, outright. Isn't that fantastic? Work, organization, you know, and I don't mean to pat myself on the back. I consider myself fortunate. I think it's by the good grace of man and God that I've gotten this far. And I hope to benefit other people too. So I guess that would be the message, would be do the math and figure out, well, what's really going on. And I think to some extent that's the heart and soul of economics. Because when you're talking about, well, economics is money. Well, money is a representation of life itself. When you work and someone pays you $10, so that was an idea I had the other day, was, well, if you're going to, you know, improve your situation, well, you need assets. Well, everyone has an asset. It's your time. And that's what employers purchase from you. And I think that's how we've been trained to think of things. You have to find an employer so you can parlay your time into money, which can be transferred into other assets. Well, maybe there's a different way of doing it. Like, oh, I need, you know, don't try and find a job so you can get the money. Try and just get the money. Like, can you get, and that's kind of my talent. I don't know how, but for some reason, people want to deal with me, I guess at least for miniatures battles. And so people are willing to give me money for the services of my company. But see, you don't even need the money. You need the actual thing that you need. And sometimes you can just ask for that. Or you can take a look at what your assets are, your skills are, and figure out, well, how can I get directly the thing that I need? And I think that's really a fantastic thing. And if you quantify it, you can quantify a human life. And if anything, the most precious asset you have is time. It seems like you're going to be alive forever, at least when you're 20 or 30. But the fact is, it's limited. When you're at a dead-end job that you don't like, you're trading a priceless commodity away, which is your time, your life. And life is too short. As many of you know, my father passed away in late 2003, and he had throat cancer, and he was just a couple of years away from retirement. And I went up to visit him. This is still when he was in relatively good shape. So I got to interview him. I got to talk to him a lot. We actually talked almost every day for about 3 months before his health declined so much that we couldn't do that anymore. So anyway, I was standing on this balcony, and it overlooked the driveway there, and he had this new truck down there. He said, "Sean, I waited all this time to get that truck." And he said that I shouldn't wait around to pursue my dreams, to do what I really wanted to do, because you never know when it's going to be over. You never know when it's going to be over. All right, well, hope you enjoyed and got your inspiration for the day. Until next time,